Scotty Sando with the Ultra Running Magazine podcast. Welcome to a new episode with that post-run my clothes smell funky scent. Hey, and thank you for putting off watching those videos of cats being jerks. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, today we're joined by Keely Henninger, who rocked Lake Sonoma 50 miler back in September, taking first place female and fourth overall. Keely is just a few months away from her second running in Western States, where she's looking to best last year's run of 19 hours and 42 minutes, which scored her 9th female overall and 20th overall. Not too shabby. As you're about to see, Keely is driven to perform on and off the trail at making this world a better place. And it's not all talk. Well, kinda, as she's part of the Trail Society podcast, which is designed to talk about challenging issues in the world of running. More on that later. Trust me, you want to hear this. Join us as we talk about altitude training, the Sufferfest, and the conversations that we should be having with young female athletes, but aren't, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the smart, talented, brilliant Keely Henninger. Let's welcome to the show, Keely. Keely, how the heck are you?
Hey, Scotty. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing great today. Just got done with a run in the Pacific Northwest with my pup.
I'm not jealous at all right now. I'm totally jealous right now. What kind of dog do you have?
She is a mutt, but she definitely is part herding dog because she's very neurotic and a very good runner.
What kind of dog is she? What's her name?
Her name is Jade, and she's like a five-year-old mutt that can run for hours.
That is awesome. I love that. I want a running dog so bad. One day, I hope.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
It is totally. And now they expect to like go out for long runs and yeah. But that's so cool to have a running partner like that. So I have a bunch of questions for you. I'm so excited that you're with us today. But before we get into those things, I want to ask you, how did you get bitten by the ultra bug?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think my story will resonate with some people because I kind of fell into it. I definitely wasn't planning to start running ultras right away, but I was kind of drug into a trail marathon. So not quite an ultra, but it was a fat ass back in Pennsylvania. So it was kind of a free race, had a very similar vibe to an ultra. And I went thinking there was a half marathon edition. And when I got there, there wasn't. It was kind of find your own way and make it through this marathon with a bunch of people you never met before. And so I did that with a Dunkin' Donuts coffee cup strapped to my hand because I didn't have water.
No.
Yep. And our RIP that coffee mug because I tripped like a mile from the finish and just smashed it to smithereens because it was a foam one. But I mean, yeah, I kind of got hooked there because I loved it and it was really, really fun. I beat said boyfriend at the time, which was awesome. Yeah. And then I read into a race happening in my backyard at Penn State called the Tussey Mountain Back, and it was the 50-mile national championships. And for some reason from that trail race, I just decided that I should train for a 50-mile, and then kind of the rest is history from there.
That is a really good story. And way to like beat out the old BF. Awesome. So you have a very big event coming up in June, Western States. This will be your second go at it. And I do have questions about that, but I want to ask you, how's your training going right now?
My training's going great. I've been able to run through all of the gloomy months of the Pacific Northwest. In the past, it could be kind of dangerous living here because you could run every single day of the year. But this year I had a nice off season in November, December, and then have been able to train really consistently since. And I'm really excited with where my fitness is really early season right now. And then excited to kind of transition now into a little bit more targeted training for Western States and get on the course a lot and go race a couple races before.
Great. So you haven't raced, at least according to Ultra Sign Up, since Western States last year.
That's not true. I did Lake Sonoma last September.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Okay. I keep forgetting that they switched it from spring to fall, and you did absolutely awesome there, taking fourth overall and nailing a first place for the women. So please excuse me for that. But
no worries.
Yeah. So it's been, you've had the one event after States, well done. And after that, it's just been kind of quiet mode. I think for a lot of us, as we get into the dredges of wintertime, we kind of peel back a little bit.
Yeah, I think putting a race on the calendar after Western States is a tough one, because if you do recover quickly enough from Western States to start said race, then you really need an off season after. And then once you go into those winter months, there's really not that many races. And so I just took it as a really good race to kind of test my fitness after States, because States didn't go super or as well as I had hoped. And Lake Sonoma is one of my favorite races, and it just so happened to be a couple months after States. And so yeah, I just decided to take a proper off season and then get back at it starting in the new year. So it was pretty good.
Ladies and gentlemen, she says States didn't go well for her. She did that in 19 hours, 42 minutes and took 9th among women and 20th overall. Yeah, I hope I have a bad day like you someday.
That is fair. It's all relative. I would
it
say
totally
that,
is. Yeah.
I'm super proud of my first go at States. So I don't want any pity or anything like that from anybody. I just know that I took a lot of things for granted going in. I didn't practice a lot of things that I think are crucial for the race.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just fun to go in kind of as a newbie at the distance and at the race and learn a lot, and just know that there's a lot to improve on for years to come.
Yeah, there's so much to get to. And so I'm going to bounce all over the place. So, and you take States very seriously among all of your other races. But I mean, you had a ticket to Western States and you said, you know what, not right now. I'm not going to do it. So I really appreciate that about you. What was that decision point like for you to say, I've got this opportunity. I don't know if it's going to come around again, given injuries, the nature of our sport.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because we aren't guaranteed to be able to make it to any start line, right? And especially not the start line of an infamous 100 miler. But
yeah.
Looking back, I just kind of acknowledged the fact that I was really new to the sport in the running world, right? Because I'd only started running at the end of my college. So I was only 25 when I got that ticket. I'd only been running for 4 years. It just didn't feel like the right thing to do, and my heart wasn't in it. And I think the biggest thing we need to know before committing to a 100-mile race is that our heart is in it, because as soon as it gets hard, which it's guaranteed to get hard, if you're not in it for the right reasons, it's not going to be enjoyable. You're not going to have a good race, and you're not going to be proud of yourself afterwards either. And so, yeah, I won that ticket, and I loved racing Sonoma, and I loved winning Sonoma and running it hard. But I think I knew that I wasn't ready to run Western States yet. And so, yeah, I declined the ticket. And actually the second place girl also declined her ticket, which was awesome. And it was almost this like spiral effect. And then a couple girls obviously did take them, but I think it was really good for the time to tell younger girls in the sport that you don't have to jump into 100 milers right away, that you're allowed to get a ticket to this infamous race. And if you don't feel ready, you're allowed to say no and go for it again in the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely something we could all take a beat from. So looking ahead to States, what's the training plan looking ahead for you? I know you have Gorges 50K coming up and Canyons 50K later this spring.
Yep. You notice a theme there. I'm not racing anything longer than 50K.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have Gorges this weekend. It's in my backyard. So that was kind of a no-brainer to sign up for. I actually work alongside Dylan on a lot of things, and Dylan is now leading that race with Jeremy of Daybreak Racing. So I felt like it was a great race to kind of kick off my season with and use as a little bit of a rust buster. And then, yeah, going down to Canyons, I'm really excited to run the course supported and pretty quickly, just get another look at it in a race format. And then I actually have a 2-week training plan or a training camp planned out with some friends on the course as well, kind of following Canyon. So in mid-May, and we'll really take that time to run a lot of good quality miles on the course, just get more familiar with it, get used to the downhills, and hopefully get some heat training in there too.
Wanting to talk a little bit about elevation training and being on the course at States. What's your elevation right now where you live?
I live probably in the highest point in Portland, Oregon. So that's cool, but it's at about 1,100 feet.
Okay. All right. So will elevation training be part of the plan going into States? And is that particular something you look ahead to for most races that have a lot of elevation?
Yeah, great question. I'd say normally in years past, I haven't altitude trained. So when I ran in Europe, I didn't do any altitude specific training. I trained in Portland and just did a lot of sauna training. However, last year, because of the pandemic and my change in career where we were allowed to work remotely, I took advantage and lived at altitude before Western States. So I'd got about 5 weeks in Park City, as well as like a week before the race in Tahoe. And so I definitely utilized that last year. And I do think it helps because a lot of the race is above 5,000 feet. But I really think that the most important thing for this year is going to be like heat training. And so trying to get a combination of that, whether that's through a lot more sauna training or not, I think is going to be the goal. And so right now I'm kind of toying the idea of going to Park City again for like a 5 or 6 week block, or just staying in Portland, getting a lot of quality miles here, and then really emphasizing that heat training because yeah, Portland's been pretty hot in June recently too. So
yeah, it has last year. Oh, last year was killer. So when looking at, was there a sweet spot when it comes to elevation training, and just speaking in general terms for those who haven't done it before, they really want to build that into their training cycle?
Yeah, so a lot of the literature suggests above a mile high, so above about 5,800 feet. Is like a sweet spot for the train low, sleep high regimen. And so you'd obviously want to sleep higher than your training if you want to maximize the like quicker running speed you get at lower elevations, and then maximize that high altitude for sleeping. And so, yeah, I normally stayed in Park City around 7,000 feet. Again, there's a lot of mixed messages in the literature to like what is optimal altitude, but I'd say you're going to be pretty safe if you're like right around 6,000 feet to like right around 8,000 feet. In that little range would be pretty good. And then the key with altitude training is to just not overdo it. And so when I go coming from lowland, right, I'm a lowlander. I was born at 400 feet. I've lived under 1,000 feet my whole life. My first week at altitude is really chill because you can really start to burn the candle at both ends if you start off really hot at altitude, because it's really exciting. It's new trails. It's beautiful, but your body is not used to it. And so your resting metabolic rate goes up. The amount of energy you need goes up. You typically don't feel as thirsty, so you don't drink as much, even though you need to be drinking more. And so you can really get yourself in a hole if you don't prioritize recovery that first week and you really overdo it. And so that's just something to be mindful too. If you are looking to train at altitude for your upcoming races, just keep a pulse on yourself that first week or two, and don't over push it.
As you can tell, folks, that Keely is very smart. And so you would be good to get a notebook out and start taking notes at this point. So go ahead and press pause. We'll go ahead and wait for you. Welcome back to the show. So last year, I mean, you crushed a sub 20 hour finish. It didn't go the way that you wanted to. So what is the approach this year to help get you to that goal that you set for yourself?
Yeah, so this year I'm definitely training a lot more of the downhill running, because I'd say my quads were toasted by 100K. And that was to be expected, as last year I had a weird ankle thing flare up, and I had like 4 weeks of not very good training / no training leading into Western States. And I think it was kind of that time where you really just need to be getting downhill miles on the legs. And so that will be one emphasis, is running downhills. The second emphasis is going to be more crew based, and it'll be actually forming plans with my crew and giving them really good, clear direction and giving them the authority to tell me to stop talking and to listen to them, because my opinion is not valid at mile 80. I don't care what I say. Like, I should be listening to what I told my crew before the race that I wanted to be doing, because that's going to be helping me in the long run. And so I'd say there's going to be a lot more of that going on, because I kind of treated it as a 50 mile. And I was like, oh, I know this works for 50 miles. I'll just assume that it's ×2 for the fueling. And that's just not the case in a race like Western States, where you have these giant fluctuations in altitude, you have these giant fluctuations in heat. So your caloric needs and your body's like response to calories is very different throughout the whole race. And so you're going to have times where you're going to be burning a lot more. You're going to have times where you're sweating a lot more. And then you're going to have times where you just don't want certain foods. And I think you have to be adaptable and have your crew have a lot of options to be able to help you when you have those different times in the course.
So this is the point episode, folks, where you want to share this episode with anyone crewing you at your next ultra. I think that's something we don't take into consideration a lot of times, when, especially for us, kind of middle of the packers, back of the packers, where we invite like, oh, my cousin ran a 5K, he can crew me, and I think a lot of us, because we want our friends and family to participate in the event. And I think that we really need to set an intention to prepare them for what they're going to experience, because I'll be walking death and I won't know what I need. And you kind of need to get outside yourself if you're not someone who's assertive and can take absolute control of a situation. And so this is really, really important stuff to be, nailing down before a big event. So are there any elements of the race that you are preparing yourself for kind of more mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, one thing my coach and I did was to develop mantras for different parts of. And so one of the bigger training weekends I got in last year was it consisted of 3 runs, and each run was supposed to mimic a part of the course where I was going to start feeling pretty crummy. So one of them was mimicking the canyons, one of them was mimicking the more faster running sections along the river, and one of them was mimicking just the constant downhill, right? And so each day I was supposed to find a mantra and kind of remember that throughout the day, because those training days were supposed to be a lot harder than the race was going to feel. And so come race day, I had that mantra still, which was just to stay strong. And it felt a lot easier because I'd already been there. I'd already focused on what I wanted to do when I felt that poorly, which was just stay strong. It didn't match a number. It didn't match a speed. It didn't match a place. It just matched a mental toughness. And it was really easy to pull on that come race day because I'd already been there. And so I'll definitely be channeling that again. As I get a lot more miles on the course this year, I'll be able to actually channel that mantra, whatever my mantra may be this year, during the canyons and during some of those really hot days running and some of those excessively downhill pounding days. And so, yeah, that's kind of one of our targets, is to really find a mantra that we can turn to on race day.
Are you someone that is sometimes susceptible to doubt when things start getting pretty tough?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think this comes to a shock to a lot of people, even though it doesn't obviously come to a shock to me. But people will come up to me after a race where, say after Sonoma, and they'll be like, wow, you won. That must have been so awesome and easy. And the answer is no. I always have some part of a race where I doubt my abilities. You doubt your identity as a runner. You doubt your ability as a runner. You wonder why you're doing it, because you get to a point where your body wants to stop, and that's natural. We're not supposed to run that far, and we're not supposed to run that far and that fast, right? So there's going to be a part of a race where you feel crummy. And so being able to accept that you're going to feel crummy and actually turn to these words that really let you empower yourself to push through those bad feelings and acknowledge that you're not a bad runner, that this is just hard. What we do to ourselves out there is not going to be easy. I think that's really, really important, because yeah, we all feel crummy out there at some point. Even if we win the race or it looks really good on paper, there's always times where we have to be able to push through.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So my other question about that is, do we put too much stock in self-identity when it comes to our performance in ultra running?
Oh, I think so. This is a can of worms, but I love this question. I think we put a lot of stock in our identities as runner, and I think it's easy to, right? Because we do it all the time. It's very easy to have your name on a paper next to a result as your identity. It's easy to have your name next to a sponsor as your identity. And it's easy to be stuck in our little small world and think that world is really big. But I think, at least for me, as I was in the sport for longer and longer, my identity continued to be wrapped up in running. And it almost turned into a negative thing, because when running wasn't going really well, I was unable to find anything else to make myself feel full with again. And so as I've been in the sport longer and I've had these ups and downs, you realize that you're not able to maximize your potential as a human or as an athlete if you can't remove yourself from running for a little bit. And so what I really try to do now is I take my running really, really seriously, maybe more seriously than I have in the past, but then I just leave it behind when it's done. And I don't let it consume the rest of my day. I don't like to go talk about running to every single person I see. I want to have a conversation about something else. Like, I don't need to talk about running all the time. And so I think, yeah, it's really easy to get caught up into this sport because the sport feels very consuming, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's even more important to find your identity outside of it and realize like you are enough regardless of how the race goes and regardless of how your training's going. And I think that will let you run a new potential and reach a new potential because you'll be able to take some of that stress you've put on yourself around running and disperse it elsewhere and have other sources that bring you joy.
So I'm really glad that for you that you said that, we don't always have to talk about running, because this is where the interview ends and we just talk about, this will become a true crime podcast. So we're going to talk about that for the rest of the episode.
Perfect.
And that is just, that is so true in how we just take ourselves too damn seriously all the time. And it's okay to let go of the ego a bit. Because I think that's where we can start to grow a bit in self-actualization. I cannot say the damn word. Excuse me.
Actualization.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I was up till 3 a.m. last night. I am tired, Scotty, today. So definitely words to heed by for sure.
Yeah.
So going on a different course here. When it comes to running ultras, what is your big why? Why do you do it?
Yeah, if you would have asked me this 5 years ago, I would have an extremely different answer because I don't think I knew my why. I think it was this never-ending finish line that I was looking for. And so I think I would have made up some answer that probably sounded pretty good, but I think deep down I didn't quite have a why because I was still searching for my finish line. No race felt good enough. But now I have a couple of reasons why I continue to do this crazy sport. And one of them is rather selfish and one of them is it's not. And the first one is because I love to test my potential. I think as humans, we are very, very capable, especially at these long distance races. And so I think it's really cool to combine the physiology that is needed for these kind of races and to really dive into the training and to test your body and just to see how far you can push it in a healthy way, right? And I think my second reason is very non-selfish, and it's because I love being in the community and I really want to be someone who helps change the community for good and really start emphasizing treating your body right and the proper way to train and to really just starting a narrative that changes how some women get into the sport, because I think the sport can be rather negative and unhealthy for some. And I would just love to stay in the sport long enough to really start to change that for some people. So kind of twofold.
Yeah, this is a perfect segue to the next part of the conversation, which is, I think, critical to have. And what I like about you, Keely, one of the many things I like about you, I'll say, is that you're using your success as a runner, as a platform to make this world a better place. And this is leading into your work with your podcast, Trail Society, that you cover with, don't tell me, with Hillary Allen and Corinne Malcolm. And so can you share with our audience who are not familiar, if you're not, you got to be, what's a podcast about? What's your mission?
Sure. Yeah. So Trail Society kind of stemmed from Free Trail. So I worked with Dylan on a women's health tutorial and he planted the seed in my mind to start a podcast. So I'll give him a little bit of the credit for the starting of the podcast because I never thought I was a podcast girl. But as soon as he planted the seed, I really got excited because the goal of the podcast is to have a consistent narrative by some women in the sport to discuss topics around female and male athletics with a female slant that aren't really discussed. And so I really just wanted to start changing the narrative around a lot of topics like menstrual cycle and body image and training and all of these things so that people felt like they were heard and that what they were going through wasn't unique. And so we just started talking about things that aren't really discussed because we wanted to raise awareness to it and really start to foster this community of healthy training and encouragement. And yeah, so that was kind of our goal. And Corinne and Hillary have a similar mindset to me. And so bringing them on board was pretty easy. And so we've tried to start fostering that community and we're really excited for where that's going.
Yeah, in our household, we're raising 3 daughters, 15 and 2 twins, 20. God help us all. Actually, they're all great human beings. And that's why I think this is so important. And I'm glad that we're talking about this. So I want to know, what are some of the bigger issues facing women and running today? Yeah,
where to start? So I would say one of the biggest issues is social media and what is portrayed on social media. So I think that all stems down to what success looks like to girls. And a lot of girls are looking at images of women who are successful or quote unquote successful. And they think that that picture is what they need to be successful. And they're not digging in to see the story behind that success. They're not seeing what that person fuels like, what they train like, what their body has transitioned from or transformed from over time. They're just seeing one snapshot in time. And that's what all these girls are starting to associate with success. And what I think is lacking is talking about the journey that it takes to get to that successful picture and how that journey can be so different for so many women. And it can still lead to just as good of success. And so I wanted to try to start steering that narrative away from like a one body fits all, one training regimen fits all, one race profile fits all, right? Like that we are all very unique and we can optimize our physiology to make ourselves successful in our own unique way. And I think that's one thing that's really bad for females right now is that they just see this end game and they think, oh, I have to do that to get there. Mm-hmm. And that I think is wrong. And so I think we need to really change that. And I think another thing, and I'm kind of kicking myself because my sister is one of my best friends. But when we were growing up in high school, as your girls probably are, we were not best friends. Okay. We really did not like each other. But this is one of the biggest problems I think in female sport is the lack of knowledge and coaching around puberty, because my sister went through this. And at the time I didn't notice what she was going through, but looking back now, it's a very blatant example. She was a standout runner as a junior, as she'd never ran the mile before. She ran a 5-minute mile as a junior in high school and was a phenomenal runner, and transitioned through senior year, went through puberty because she went through puberty really late and couldn't break a certain other time, like wasn't close to her last PR. But instead of working with her and changing up her training and adding strength work and adding patience, her coaches got really mad at her and started making her feel responsible for her team's demise. And she ended up quitting running and absolutely hating it for 5 years. And I just hope that we can start increasing the knowledge of coaches and of parents, because I don't think parents really know that either, of what happens during puberty and how you can address that and actually like utilize it and let the girls know that that's normal and praise it so that they don't drop out of sport and they don't hate sport, and that we can continue to increase girl participation in sport going forward, because I think we're losing so many girls to sport at a young age because they don't know what's going on in their body.
Yeah. And not to mention the psychological component that comes along with it, which is so critical, especially now when depression and anxiety are at an all-time high. And so the pressure is just, it's a pressure cooker right now. And so this is such a great conversation to have, you know, for parents, partners, and friends. What are some things that we can do to really kind of change this sort of narrative?
Yeah, well, I guess if you're talking about younger girls, I would say you should just be talking with them about how their body will change, and then really working with them to see what optimizes their body as it's changing. And so maybe that's having a discussion to them about how they're feeling when they're running and how they're feeling when they're doing other things. And maybe you find another sport for them to do for a year or two because running's really hurting them and they haven't been able to figure out how to optimize their body yet. So I think it's just having these open discussions around, hey, you might want to do this sport or you might want to do this activity, but maybe it's not feeling good for you right now. And so can we find something else that brings you joy in the meantime, and try to work with your body instead of fight it and push yourself to do these things, and letting them know that's okay. That if they want to take a divergent off this old path they thought was their concrete path, that's okay. That we're going to support them through it. And I think just being there for them and letting them know it's okay to not be as successful for a little bit or have a steer off your course is okay.
Yeah. And not to tell anyone how to raise their child, but I can see the benefit of having those conversations at a very age appropriate level, because trying to get through to a teenager when things are already difficult is mission impossible sometimes.
Absolutely.
And so that's why having those conversations earlier in life that are age appropriate, you know, could benefit them. And whether or not those things happen, it's coming. I mean, their body is going to change. There's no escaping that. But if athletics and other parts of their lives that are not athletic are important to them, then it's really good to be carrying this conversation forward. You know. Yeah.
And I was talking to Dr. Krause the other day. She's the head of the female athlete program at Stanford. And she works with a lot of female athletes who are coming up through middle school and high school. And she said one of her biggest problems is emphasizing the fact that if you are pushing through puberty now and you're training in an unhealthy way for your body and you're really ignoring those signs, that could have really negative downstream effects, right? That could impact bone density when you're older, all of these things. But when you're a 12 to 16-year-old girl, you don't really care about your bone density when you're 40. You can't resonate with that. And so one of her new avenues of thought was to showcase that when you do train incorrectly and don't give your body the patience it needs, it can lead to decreases in performance. And that's something they care about. And so if we can emphasize to them that, hey, you might not need to push right now because we need to make sure you go through puberty and you menstruate and you have a regular menstrual cycle, then they'll be able to perform better. Then they might step off the gas a little bit because they care about their short-term performance. They can't understand the downstream effects of long-term negative impacts.
I hope if you're a parent that you're already, subscribing to Trail Society podcast now. So what resources can you recommend to folks just to kind of get on this train?
Yeah. So there's a new initiative by Stanford actually called FASTR, FASTR. And that is a female athlete platform. And they are kind of cartoonizing and creating really, really easy to understand visuals about things like overtraining syndrome and your menstrual cycle and all of these things. So it's a little bit easier to understand. And I also think that, just like talking with your daughter or your son's coaches and like understanding where they're coming from so that you both can approach the person well, because there's a ton of conflicting resources out there. And so, I'll send you some links to add into the show notes if you want to. Because
I would love that. Absolutely. Thanks, Keely.
Sure.
So looking at the overall umbrella of women in ultras, where do you think we're at with that? And what should we do to get more women involved in the sport?
I love this question. So I think female participation in ultras is going up. I think we can all agree with that. There was a study published by, I think it was Iron Far or one of the ultra publishers that said that there was an increase from the 80s through now up to like 30% women or 20% women. So that's exciting. But you still see races like UTMB and Hard Rock getting participation numbers around 10%. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's something we really need to change. But I guess backing up a little bit, I do see a big increase in females coming into the sport. And I get messages all the time from women saying, wow, I saw you do this race. And so I think I want to try to do this race. And so I think we're witnessing firsthand right now what representation does. And so I do think because we're getting a little bit of an increase in females in the sport, we're having a snowball effect and more females are starting the sport. And I think we just need to prioritize this with other ethnic groups and other minority groups so that we can start growing the diversity of the sport that way as well. But it won't happen overnight. And I think with those more interesting races that are still at really low participation numbers, I think lowering the barrier of entry for some of them is going to be necessary to increase the female and diverse or in the minority groups participation. Because right now to get into something like Hard Rock, there's only 7 or 9 qualifying races. And those races are expensive, very hard to get into and maybe not at the right times of the season. And so there, just getting into the lottery is really hard. And so, thinking that through, maybe it's changing the cutoff times for more females so they can actually finish those races and therefore get into that Hard Rock lottery. There's so much space for this right now. And so I think it's time to get a little bit creative to try to increase participation in some of those races. But I think just showing up to races as a female and it will increase participation as more people see you out there.
Yeah. So, and the conversation really is so simple. The solution can be so simple. And that's just talking with people, encouraging people to come out and try the sport. Don't tell your friend who's on the couch that, hey, come run a 50K with me, be gentle about it, exactly. Be realistic about it, but have the conversation.
Because I find that a lot of running groups that are maybe a minority running group or a primarily road running group, they're interested in trail.
Mhm.
They just don't know how to start, or they don't know where to start. And so I think just having those connections be made, whether it's a trail running group gets linked to a road running group in a city and is able to show them the trails, like something like that, I think could help too. And I actually had a conversation with a lovely man out of Philadelphia named Richard Izza, and he runs a run club there that's a very, very inclusive run club, who he jokes would never run trail because he doesn't belong on the trail.
Mhm.
But we had a couple of our listeners from Philadelphia reach out to Richard, who are local trail runners, who are now going to partner with him to show his group the trails. And so just like increasing the awareness, because I don't think any trail runner wants to feel like we're not including others.
Yeah.
I think we just don't know how to go about it. And so, yeah, reaching out to your local run clubs that don't normally go on trails and like asking them if you can run a trail run for them or take them to the trails one day. That's a way to get people into the sport and get them introduced to how trail running is.
It used to be that it was such a mystery on how to get involved in this sport. Like you had to know a guy who knew a guy who heard something one time about this crazy run from Squaw Valley to Auburn, and that's just not the case anymore. And through technology, we can just spread the word virally to let people know that this exists, and its popularity is just skyrocketing year over year. We're just seeing more and more events. Will just lend to more and more people getting involved. I mean, just the cascading effect of all the benefits that happen from this is tremendous. And I'm so excited about it. Getting back to women for a second, it's the self-talk that, I think people can do. Like, I don't look like that. I'm not skinny. That just seems like insurmountable. I don't even drive that far. But it's also like tapping into the human potential of, yes, you can do it. Everyone started where you're at. Everyone. It does not happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you tell someone who's saying, you know what, I just don't look like anyone out there, whether it's because of my body image, what I look like, where I come from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess I start off by saying, can you describe to me what you think you should look like? And you would be shocked at the diversity in answers, because nobody really knows. And it's because, yeah, there might be a picture perfect runner body, but there's also a lot of different interpretations of that. And so you have to remember that there is not a one size fits all. And so that's not going to be something that you can use as your driver for participation or for performance. And we also have to remember that even those women who might quote unquote look like what you want to look like, they might also get ridiculed, and they probably do, by someone who thinks they don't look like a runner. And so what we end up having is this gigantic world of nobody who actually looks like a runner, who thinks they look like a runner, So at the end of the day, we can't use that as our basis for performance, because what we look like does not equal performance. And so then my follow-up question is like, what do you want to do? So like, what is your level of performance you want to get to? And like, let's optimize your body to get you there. And then your body will figure itself out. And whether that looks like a certain way, that's what it's irrelevant, because you're going to get to a certain level of performance, and that's unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so really just emphasizing that a body does not equal performance, but optimizing your body will lead to performance, is kind of what I try to talk through a lot of the women that I work with, and just give them the confidence to really trust the process to actually achieve their potential without focusing on external like gratification through what they think they should look like.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I'm so glad that your podcast exists so that you can go deep on these topics, which are so important. So anything I can do to support you guys, let me know. You guys are doing wonderful work, and just keep it up.
Thank you so much.
I do have a string of kind of questions that are going to bounce all over the place for you. Nothing weird, I don't think. Well, you'll let me know, I guess. But all related to running, can you share any race day tips for fueling in terms of what works for you? I know there are lots of variables when it comes to, the type of exercise you're doing and the weather and all that stuff, but generally speaking.
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest thing for race day is to don't try anything super new on race day. So if you listen to a podcast tomorrow and you're racing the next day, don't, because you listen to the podcast, go buy every single thing that that person eats and try to do it on race day. Stick to what you've been practicing. And so get to race day with a really concrete plan, with what you've been practicing, but also with a little bit of flexibility to adapt if needed. And so when I say don't try anything new, I don't mean if you go to an aid station and the pretzels look amazing to not eat them, go ahead and eat them, but don't try a totally new plan because you're a little bit nervous and you don't know what to do and you hear this other plan sounds good. Yeah. Don't do that on race day. So yeah, go in with a plan of things you've practiced, because your body likes routine, and your body's going to be very optimized if you're fueling the way you normally fuel.
Well, I totally disagree with you, because I'm suggesting to people that they carry a watermelon when they run. It just works for me. You know, I'm getting strength exercise and I can eat at the same time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, I do think, I think that you do need to find stuff that tastes really well, because there's going to be a point in time where you don't want to eat, and if watermelon's your thing, then you should go for it. But I will say one thing that I think a lot of people underestimate is how much fuel they might need.
Yeah.
And so while there's no one size fits all, like everything, there is a guideline of a very vast range of amount of carbohydrates you do need an hour. And obviously it's, again, not set in stone, but it is between 40 and 100 grams of carbohydrates. So that's between 2 and 5 gels, to put that into perspective. And I can say right now that most people probably aren't doing that per hour.
Yeah.
And I think just going out on practice runs and training runs with varying amounts of carbohydrates per hour and seeing what really works for you. And being okay with the fact that maybe you're the kind of person who needs 4 gels an hour, but you feel like a rock star the whole time, and that's okay. Right. So I think finding your optimal range and then being really okay with that, and using it as a superpower instead of like, oh man, I need to eat all this food during running, is really important.
Yeah. When I tried my first attempt at 100, you should have seen my shopping cart the night before. It was loaded with so much food, because I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to want. So I'll just take one of it. No, strike that. 3 of everything. So for post long run, what works for you?
After a long run, I do mostly a protein shake right away. So I used to be one of those people who tied up my fueling into my ego. So I would be like, oh, I don't have time to eat after my run. I'll just, get to work and then I'll skip my run or my lunch, and then maybe I'll eat later. No, now I do a GU protein blend recovery in some oat milk or some regular milk. Sometimes I make a full blown smoothie with like bananas and fruits and vegetables and yogurt and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, typically right away I get that in minimum. And then I have like a normal lunch.
I'm hungry for a green smoothie right now. Okay. After the interview, I'm going to do that. So what are your golden rules for taking care of yourself?
I would say prioritize rest. So you can't rest enough in this sport, I don't think, because we put our bodies through so much. The second one is to run your workouts really hard and like feel pride in crushing a workout and maybe feeling good during it, but really putting your best effort into your workouts. And then the third is just running your easy days really, really easy. So there's no shame in logging really slow miles for your recovery runs. You're not proving a point to go run your recovery runs at a fast clip if you're not actually recovering. And so that's one thing I've learned over the years, is to kind of swallow my pride when it comes to pace, because nobody's ever going to take away a first place trophy from you because your recovery runs slower than the next girl's. That's just not how that works. And so really just listen to yourself and go easy on those easy days and be able to optimize the hard days.
I don't know how many times that I've gone out for just a recovery run or easy run, and then up on the trail, I'll see someone running and think, I got to pass them, and just leaving like you said, the pride, the ego aside, and, I'll be waiting for you at home when you get there.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten passed in Forest Park, which is the park here in Portland, out my door, by some people who recognized me, and they were like, wow, do all professional trail runners like walk?
Yes, they do.
Like, oh my goodness, this is my off season, but also
wait, you got trolled on your own trail?
Yeah, I got trolled. But again, like I almost use it as a way to teach them about recovery or off days, right? It's like, hey, you don't know what I'm doing or why I'm doing this for, but at the end of the day, everyone needs downtime.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, took first place at, Lake Sonoma. So what do I know? Right. So,
Exactly.
let's see. And how do you, I think we talked about this earlier, but about dealing with Sufferfest, and what do you tell yourself when you're in that pain cave?
So as soon as I start running in a race, I start off feeling amazing. But then as soon as that switches and you start wondering why you're running and why you feel so crummy, I have to take a step back and tell myself, like, I choose to be here.
Mhm.
And so therefore I'm choosing to put my body through this and to go through this painful thing. And so I can't take an easy way out and choose not to try and choose not to suffer. And so I have to remind myself that it's almost like a refresher. And then I have to kind of pull on my mantra, because going back and reminding myself of that is not always enough. Obviously, like, some of the stuff we do is really hard. So you're going to need something else to pull on. And so, yeah, I go back to that first step and then I find my mantra and I'm like, today's goal was just to be tough. And so get out of your head, stop making yourself feel like you're a baby, and just push through like you wanted to and be strong right now. And again, that might not mean a certain mileage pace. It might not mean a certain hour for the race. It just means be tough. And so recentering on that is always really, really important. And then I also make myself eat an extra like gel or chew or whatever, because typically the negative thoughts for me really come on when I'm in a bigger energy deficit than I should be.
A question I've never asked anyone about when it comes to being at Sufferfest and running through pain, it's, well, what kind of pain are you usually dealing with? For someone like me, it's usually I have a niggle that's popping up somewhere in my body. It doesn't feel good. I think I can run through it. Odds are I'm going to run right into an injury because I didn't stop. But what does that feel like for you most of the time?
Well, I think this is a really good question, because I think there are two forms of Sufferfest. I think there is a self-induced Sufferfest, and then I think there is like a Sufferfest that is just because of what you're doing to yourself through the race. And so when I refer to the self-induced Sufferfest, I'm referring to those times where you might have something go wrong. So it might not be a niggle or something, but maybe you just feel off from the beginning. And so then instead of fueling and treating yourself right and acknowledging that you're having a crummy day, maybe you start treating yourself worse, and you kind of fall into this pity party of self like deprecation because you felt crappy from the beginning. Therefore, you're going to have a crappy race. And so you stop treating yourself well. And I feel like that's a self-inflicted sufferfest, because it's an additional sufferfest you're self-inflicting on yourself during a sufferfest. Unnecessary. We don't need to go through two Sufferfests. The second Sufferfest, I think, is something kind of what you're talking about. It's where stuff just gets hard, right? Maybe you do have a little niggle pop up, or maybe you did stop fueling for an hour or two and you start bonking. Those are things you're going to then have to address in relation to the race. And so my rule of thumb is, if it's a niggle that pops up, that's not just like a tightness because your shoe's a little too tight, or, just something feels a little bit off, then I'd say you probably should stop racing, because you're not going to want to injure yourself long term pushing through a niggle just to finish a race, if that means you can't walk for 6 months, right? So I'd say then you really have to decide, like, is this worth it for my health? Because at the end of the day, me finishing this race is not as important as me being healthy and being able to be my best self outside of the race. Now, if it's just like a pride thing and you haven't fueled for a couple hours and you're feeling really, really angry and you want to drop, then you have to reassess like why you're doing it again, and maybe just suck it up and start fueling to try to get out of that hole.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. I have two more questions for you. How do you like to relax? What do you do for fun?
Great question.
Do you relax? Please tell me yes.
I've had to get very good at relaxing recently because I quit my job. So I used to balance working as a physiologist for 40 to 60 hours a week with running. And so I didn't have any time to relax. But now I'm getting pretty good at it. And I'd say I love to paint. I have a house that has a lot of house projects. So I've been tackling little projects throughout the week to kind of just take my mind off of running and off of other things. And they aren't like labor intensive projects. They're like little painting projects or stuff that is more fun. So it feels a lot more relaxing. And I also just like to romp around outside with my dog. Me and my boyfriend go on a lot of bike rides at really, really chill paces. And then we also just love to cook and have friends over. So sometimes it'll be like 2 hours of cooking like these awesome, really, really healthy, nutritious meals for like a bunch of friends who come over, and we get to just share food with all these people that we love. And so those are things that I like to fill my time with. And I also obviously read a ton of really nerdy scientific literature, and I'm taking some classes. So I also like to spend some time just reading and studying.
You're so cool. Dang it. You're so cool. What does having, you have, your sponsors are Ultra, Goo Energy Labs, and Nathan Hydration. What does having a sponsor mean to you?
That's a great question. So I would say that recently I've reevaluated why I have sponsors. And so I think now a sponsor just needs to be someone who believes in me as a person and wants to highlight my voice as both a human and as an athlete. And so all of the sponsors I currently have really love the direction that I want to go as a human and as an athlete. And they really are encouraging of the races that I want to do. And they're willing to support me so that I can pursue these dreams full time and not have to work multiple jobs.
That's cool. That's cool. Getting back to women in running, something I just recalled. Have you heard about the sports bra in Portland?
Yes. It's going to be the first female sports bar in the United States because they're only going to play female sports. And I believe it opens in 2 weeks.
That is so
I'm really excited. Yeah.
Yeah. We're coming up to Oregon. One of our kiddos, she goes to OSU. And cool. So that'll be a definite stop for us to go check that out. I'm so glad that's happening.
I am too. And I think it's very timely because if you notice, the WNBA just won a really big private money grant from a lot of different sponsors, including like Nike and Buick. And there's a lot of ads going through NCAA March Madness right now that are emphasizing female sports. So there was a pretty powerful one put out by Buick that was basically highlighting these insane sports moments and then basically shoving it in your face that you've never heard of it because you don't watch female sports. And so it's a really cool time to open a bar like that because yes, female sports do not get the media coverage they need. And so if you're going to take a stand and only play female sports, even if there's only a couple on at a time, that's awesome.
I see franchise coming down the pipeline. I hope. My last question for you is, if you could jump in my time machine and go visit your 8-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? And you can't say buy Google stock.
Dang it. Man, I would tell myself to not take myself too seriously because I didn't run growing up, but I was all invested in my schoolwork and all invested in basketball. And those were my identities. And so I would want to remind myself that I am good enough without any of those things and that you're allowed to choose your own path. And it might not be what everyone else wants for you, but that you are good enough on your own and you're allowed to like know that. And you don't have to be defined through your sport or your academics or anything.
That's so cool. That is so cool. Keely Henninger, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'll be seeing you at States.
Yes, I'm so excited to see you in Olympic Valley. It will be awesome.
All right. I'll see you there. And thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, no problem.